The trade deadline is here, and the Tennessee Titans need to sell. And it sounds like T'Vondre Sweat may be first to go. We'll discuss all the trade possibilities on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Titans fans, the trade deadline is here, and the Tennessee Titans have a lot of irons in the fire. We're going to talk about why I still believe in Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker, go over all of the different trade options that the Tennessee Titans will have to get rid of, including Calvin Ridley, Chigakonkwo, Tony Pollard, some defensive guys as well. But we start with what I think is the biggest and most surprising name that we've heard on the trade block, and it's T'Vondre Sweat. Before we dive in, I do want to thank you for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. We're going to have a lot of news to discuss on tomorrow's show, as well as I'm expecting 2 trades from the Tennessee Titans between now and the trade deadline. And I'll be honest with you guys, always a very scary proposition to do content at this time, these kinds of times around the NFL, because the Titans could make a move at any moment in time. The 30 minutes after we get done talking about all the different trades, the Titans could finally make their first trade deadline trade, and it just ruins the entire conversation. So you always live in fear at these times, but the reality is I'm more fearful right now than normal because the Titans have so many different players that they could possibly trade away. And I want to talk about who those guys are, what the Titans could get back. But the biggest one, and we talked about it at the end of yesterday's show after we talked about the game, but T'Vondre Sweat's name has been out there a ton over the last week or so. Multiple big-name reporters like Diana Rossini and Albert Breer talking about T'Vondre Sweat's name, saying the Titans are taking calls on him. Having some folks locally who cover the team mention things about T'Vondre Sweat and that, that they may not be enamored with him, or this isn't a shock if you're paying attention, and all these different little breadcrumbs for the T'Vondre Sweat conversation. And I know to most people, it sounds absolutely insane, but at the end of the day, when we talk about the Titans making trades here, they need to get real value back. And the reality is all these players that, everybody wants to trade every week after they have bad games, other teams are looking at these players and say, why would we trade for them if they're terrible? So the Titans only have a couple of players that are actually even good, so it would make sense that those are the players that have the opportunity to be traded. Now, with T'Vondre Sweat, with him just being drafted, a year and a half ago, that makes it a bit of a shock to some people. But as I said yesterday, if you look at what Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker have done so far, there's 2 different paths that they've walked down with these trades. One, Jarvis Brownlee Jr. That's a culture trade. That's, hey, this guy isn't on an expiring contract. This guy isn't going to be a free agent at the end of the year. He's just somebody we don't want around as we build our team. Roger McCreary, on the other hand, was a tank trade. That is, you're going to be a free agent at the end of the year. You're not going to be around after the season. Let's get something of value for you while we can. So those are 2 different trades that both happen with cornerbacks, but they tell us the paths that the Tennessee Titans could go down here. There are plenty of tank trade candidates that we're going to talk about. Tony Pollard, Dre'Mont Jones, and Arden and these guys who aren't going to be around after the year. But if they were to trade T'Vondre Sweat, that would be another culture trade. That is more like Jarvis Brownlee Jr. That is, we do not want you in our building. We do not want you around our program. We do not believe that you are the right type of person to be the foundation of what we're trying to build going forward. It would be a personal thing. It would be a referendum on T'Vondre Sweat behind the scenes. And if you've listened to my show this year, I try to be as chill about T'Vondre Sweat conversations as possible because I didn't like the T'Vondre Sweat pick coming out. I thought they overdrafted a run-stuffing, two-down defensive lineman who didn't utilize his power and had conditioning concerns and weight concerns and off-field concerns. I just thought he was way overdrafted. He wasn't a guy who I wanted to draft at all, period. And he's been better than what I expected. So I try to be real chill about the T'Vondre Sweat conversation. But the reality is, at some point, I can't just completely ignore all of the stuff. Like, I mentioned it before. Jim Wyatt in the offseason said T'Vondre Sweat looks just okay. If you have the team beat writer who is an employee of the team, who is going to be more optimistic about certain things than other writers and other people who cover the team, that is something that's going to make me raise my eyebrows at. You have Kaharski talking about him a couple of weeks ago, saying, are they that happy with him behind the scenes? I've talked to a few people close to the team that I don't think should qualify as sources. I'm not going to be like, per sources, I have heard that, but it's not like that. It's more casual conversation, but there are people who have been like, I don't know if he's a guy who always shows up to the training room on time. I don't know if he is a guy who's super locked in the offseason. I don't know if he's a guy who takes his training super serious. So I've had people telling me that. And then you hear that he's in trade conversations. And guys, whether you want to hear it or not, and I think Sweat's an okay player. He's good. He's not terrible. But I also don't think that T'Vondre Sweat looks like the next Vita Vea or the next Dexter Lawrence, or that T'Vondre Sweat is ever going to be more than a glorified Tyir Tart. Like that, we haven't seen that yet either. That's being too complimentary as well to act like Sweat's shown that he's one of those type of guys. So if you're Mike Borgonzi and you're Chad Brinker and you didn't fly to his grandma's house to make sure that you liked him and his family and multiple times and doing all this vetting, and you truly don't believe that T'Vondre Sweat is the type of guy who needs to be in your locker room going forward, then of course you would deal that player. Now, like I said yesterday, I do not think that trading T'Vondre Sweat is the wise move for the Titans. I don't think that they should do that. But if they are going to do that, they need to get a third-round pick back. He was a second-round pick, a high second-round pick just yesterday. Just last year. You cannot go from the number 38 pick and trade that asset away to get back a fourth rounder, to get back 120, 130. You know what I mean? You can't do that. So while I understand the logic that would lead them to trading T'Vondre Sweat, I don't want the Titans to actually do that unless they get a third-round pick back. You get a fourth-round pick back, I won't hate the deal. You get a fifth-round pick back, you have failed entirely. What a waste. T'Vondre Sweat as a player is worth more than a fifth-round pick. Like, I think he was overdrafted. But I think a fourth rounder would have absolutely been fair. So I think the Titans should try to get a third-round pick back, a late third-round pick from a contending team. But if not, it better be a fourth. And if you're not getting that, then don't trade him. There's no one saying that you have to trade him. There's no, gun to your head saying you must trade T'Vondre Sweat. But let me just say this. If they do, that is a complete rejection of everything that Ran Carthon did. And I think that complete rejection of everything that Ran Carthon did kind of informs my theory on Chad Brinker and now Mike Borgonzi. And it also, just to be honest, still gives me faith in Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi. And I'll tell you why we would all say that this is better than purgatory and why I still have faith in Borgonzi and Brinker to get this thing on track. But outside of T'Vondre Sweat, there are some players who I do think absolutely need to be traded. Let's talk about those and what the Titans should get back for him. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by BILT. Nobody likes paying rent, but if you must, you might as well get something for it. And that's where BILT, B-I-L-T, comes in. BILT is changing the game by turning your rent payment into real rewards you can actually use. When you pay rent through BILT, you earn flexible points that can be redeemed towards hundreds of hotels and airlines and even a future rent payment, maybe even your next Lyft ride and more. But BILT isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you around your entire neighborhood. I love that BILT finally makes rent work for you. You're earning points every month on something you already have to pay, whether it's grabbing food at your local favorite restaurant, heading to the gym, you can still earn rewards. Turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use that link so they know that we sent you. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. The trade deadline is here, and the biggest name for the Tennessee Titans to be on the trade block is T'Vondre Sweat. We talked about that. Now, want to move forward to the other players I think could, would, should be traded and how much the Titans should get back for them. Again, I'm going to answer your guys' questions, plus explain why I still have optimism in Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi at the end of the show, so get those questions into the comment section right now. It's a live episode here. Again, it's a very scary time of year for me. New news could break at any moment in time, rendering the content useless. So you got to live in fear at this time. But no trades yet. As of this recording, it's about 6:15 Eastern, 6:12 Eastern time. And we haven't seen anything come out, but we're hearing about some deals. The Dallas Cowboys have made a trade, but the trade is not going to come out until tomorrow. And it makes you wonder, are a lot of the deals that we're going to hear about tomorrow actually done today, but the NFL wants them to be announced tomorrow to make the trade deadline a bigger deal and to, at this point, keep the nation's attention on the Monday Night Football game. The NFL doesn't like to split their pot. They don't like to have a bunch of people paying attention to stuff other than the football. They try to hold certain news until days that there aren't news so they can keep their thumb on the national news cycle. And we heard about the Jalen Phillips trade to the Philadelphia Eagles for a third-round pick. There's a Dallas Cowboys trade that is completed that we don't know about. But anyways, with that being said, Calvin Ridley is a name that has continued to come up in trade conversations. Now, Calvin Ridley hasn't played in a few weeks, so you wonder if that's going to actually prevent a deal from happening. But I think like T'Vondre Sweat, Calvin Ridley is the guy who could get the Titans the most possible value. I think you could get a fourth-round pick for Calvin Ridley. You could attach your fourth-round pick, get a third-round pick for Calvin Ridley. I think that's all possible for the Tennessee Titans, and at this point, Calvin Ridley hasn't played for multiple weeks. Calvin Ridley didn't make a difference for the Tennessee Titans in terms of wins and losses, so if he can get you the most return, I think you absolutely ship Calvin Ridley. Now, Teron Davenport came out with a report saying that the Titans aren't shopping Calvin Ridley, as some reports are saying. They have, however, received calls about Ridley and other players. I think that is, to me, just kind of like trying to make Calvin Ridley feel better if he doesn't get traded. Like, hey, man, we weren't out there shopping you. You know what I mean? Like, we're not out there shopping you, but people called and we just listened. That's like, hey, we don't want to get rid of you, but, you know, people are calling. I don't know. To me, Calvin Ridley is a guy who has tremendous value. And again, I think that if the Tennessee Titans were to trade Calvin Ridley, that would be the best possible return that they would get on any of their players outside of Jeffrey Simmons. And I don't think that the Tennessee Titans are going to trade Jeffrey Simmons. But with Calvin Ridley, I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers have been on the hunt for a wide receiver. I think that would make a ton of sense for them. He fits very well with a big physical player like DK Metcalf, I think. And remember, Pittsburgh's made some moves recently Would they have the draft capital to make a move like that? I don't know whether they would be willing, but again, I think Calvin Ridley makes a ton of sense. The New England Patriots are looking for another wide receiver, and Kashawn Boutte is going to be going on IR that he announced on his own on something called Discord. Makes me feel old, but either way, the Patriots have been sniffing around wide receivers, and I think Calvin Ridley can make some sense there. So Calvin Ridley is a name that I would be more than willing to trade away because he's going to get you a good return. Tony Pollard is another name on offense that everybody is wanting to get rid of. I think it makes a ton of sense. Tajay Spears is the better, more explosive player right now. The Titans aren't going to keep Tony Pollard after the season. They're going to let him go. So if you could trade him to maybe the Chargers, who need some running back help. There are plenty of teams out there. Maybe the Giants could use some running back help. The Patriots apparently are still looking for some running back help. But the problem with Tony Pollard as compared to Calvin Ridley is Tony Pollard ain't getting you anything close to what Calvin Ridley would get you. I think Tony Pollard would get you a 6th-round pick. That's what I would expect for Tony Pollard. Now, if you want to attach a 6th-round pick and Tony Pollard and move up for a 5th-round pick, like what we just saw with the Roger McCreary trade, I'm all on board for that. The player and a pick to move up some. I'm okay with those kind of swaps. But at some point, the Tennessee Titans need to just get pure picks back. A pick. You know? Like, it can't just be swaps. At some point, they need to increase their ammo, not just improve their bullets. Like, that has to be a thing for the Titans, too. But I think Tony Pollard would be an easy player that they could get rid of. Chigakonkwo is on that list as well. Tucker Kraft just got injured in Green Bay. Maybe Chigakonkwo would make sense for the Green Bay Packers. They've been dealing with some injuries with their wide receivers, and we know that Chigakonkwo can kind of do a little bit of both. Matthew Golden is a little bit banged up. Jaden Reed still out. Now Tucker Kraft out. I think Chigakonkwo to the Packers would make some sense, and you look for connections there. We know that the Titans and the Packers have a previous relationship because of Chad Brinker's connections to that organization, and they did the Malik Willis trade. So you look at teams that have gotten things done before, and you think, hey, they could probably get something done again. So I think that would make a ton of sense. One of those 3 players on offense, Calvin Ridley, Chigakonkwo, Tony Pollard, I'd like to see one of those players get traded. And then one of the players on the edge, Arden Key, Dre'Mont Jones, who I think is the most likely now, Jihad Ward. I think those players would make a ton of sense. I'd like to see one of those guys traded. The problem with Arden Key is he's been injured. Is somebody going to take Arden Key being injured when he hasn't played in a while? Is that something that a team would be willing to do? But San Francisco, they don't have Nick Bosa. They just lost their 1st-round pick, Mykel Williams. That would make a ton of sense. The Cowboys are looking for edge help. That would make a ton of sense. The Patriots are looking for edge help. That would make a ton of sense. The Chicago Bears, Dayo Odeyingbo, one of their free agents that they just signed this year, torn Achilles, which he started his NFL career with a torn Achilles. You do feel bad for Dayo Odeyingbo. But nonetheless, that's an opportunity where the Tennessee Titans could take advantage and make a trade with the Chicago Bears. I think that would make a ton of sense. And with the way that Draymond Green has been playing, 4 straight games with the sack, been a good player against the run. Dre'Mont Jones is playing really good football. He's on a 1-year deal, so it's not a big financial commitment. Also, the Titans may not want to bring him back. I think that is the player that makes the most sense. I think, to me, if I had to predict who gets traded, I think Tony Pollard and I think Dre'Mont Jones are the guys who ultimately get traded. I think the Tennessee Titans get 2 6th-round picks back for those players. One of them, I think, well, let's say it like this. I think one of them will be the player in a 6th for a 5th, and one of them will just be a pure 6th-round pick. That's my expectation. It's not going to be as exciting, as thrilling, as this and that. I don't think Sweat gets traded. I don't think that Calvin Ridley gets traded. I don't think that Arden Key gets traded. I just don't see those things happen. And I'm not against them. And I'm perfectly fine with being wrong about it. It's just a trade prediction. But at the end of the day, that is my expectation. I don't think it'll be, 4 or 5, 6 trades or something like that. But worth noting, Mike Borgonzi, Titans general manager, will talk with the media on Wednesday going over all the trade deadline moves. So it'll be interesting to hear what they have to say about whatever takes place. But with that being said, again, I know that a lot of people disagree with me. I understand it, but I still have faith in Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker, and I'm going to answer some of your guys' questions in the chat, so get those in right now. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game, you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who's going to score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. You can go over on the points, under on assists, over on rebounds, under on the three-pointers. Combine it with a money line, and over-under for a game, total points. The possibilities are endless. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Again, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about T'Vondre Sweat being on the trade block. We talked about the other names that could potentially be gone for the Tennessee Titans and what they could get back. Now, I just want to do a quick Roland's rant, you could call it, on my optimism for Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi and why I don't think that those guys are terrible already or anything like that. Before I dive in, thanks again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Anyways, here's the reality. And I go back to the T'Vondre Sweat conversation. Some people blame Chad Brinker for the moves that got made while Ran Carthon was the general manager. And I get that, and I understand. Ran Carthon hired Chad Brinker. He was a part of, the process in 2023's offseason. Chad Brinker got promoted last year above Ran Carthon. So now how can you blame anything on Ran Carthon, this and that? But I think it's obvious. I think it's obvious. It's obvious that Ran Carthon hated the stuff that Chad Brinker hated the stuff that Ran Carthon did. It's obvious. He hated it. And I think that Chad Brinker hating Ran Carthon's moves and Chad Brinker being right about that is why he got promoted. It's why Chad Brinker is the liaison for Amy Adams-Strunk right now. We're looking at it and we're like, oh, Chad Brinker was involved in all of this. It's still his fault. But Amy Adams-Strunk is looking at it and saying, well, Chad was the one who told me he didn't want to do the L'Jarius Sneed trade. Chad was the one who said that we should tear it down and we need to trade some players and not spend a bunch of money in free agency. Chad was the one who said that Jarvis Brownlee Jr. and T'Vondre Sweat were bad character guys and they didn't want them in the locker room. And then Chad Brinker turned out to be right. And Amy Adams-Strunk is like, well, this guy has been right about all these things not being good moves. And then they fire Ran Carthon after 1 year on his own. And Chad Brinker is now hiring the next general manager. Why would, if Chad Brinker was on board for L'Jarius Sneed, Calvin Ridley, the draft picks, blah, 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 if he was on board for all that stuff, why would Amy Adams-Strunk give him more power and promote him? See, I know why you guys are frustrated when you think about it like that. But if you think about it in terms of, it is clear that Ran Carthon and everything that he did is being thoroughly rejected by Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi. If you look at it from that sense, then it's clear what happened. Ran Carthon did a bunch of stuff. Chad Brinker didn't agree with it. He went to Amy Adams Strunk and said, I don't agree with what we're doing right now. The moves didn't work, just like Chad Brinker said. And Amy Adams Strunk said, you do know what you're talking about. You're in charge. Seems pretty clear to me that that's the way that it went. And the actions of what they are doing right now are telling you that that is what is happening behind the scenes. Getting rid of Jarvis Brownlee Jr., putting Calvin Ridley out there, shopping T'Vondre Sweat. Like, it's obvious to me what's happened here. We could see what happened. Now, that doesn't mean that you should or shouldn't believe in whatever, but I am not going to lie. That is what leaves me optimistic. There is at least a non-0% chance that Chad Brinker was actually right about all this stuff all along. And that's why Amy Adams Strunk went to him. That's why she trusts him. That's why she's letting him be in charge the rest of the way. And Mike Borgonzi has actually done a decent job with the things that he's done. And his draft class is the only positive thing that this team has going for it right now. So forgive me, but I am not going to judge Chad Brinker vicariously through the moves that Ran Carthon made. And I'm certainly not going to give up hope in Mike Borgonzi in 8 months of him being on the job when there's a lot of good that he's done as well. He signed Dre'Mont Jones, who's been doing very well. The only good stuff on the team is stuff that Brinker's brought in, essentially, other than Jeffrey Simmons. So, I'm just saying, I understand the frustration. The team sucks. Everybody's terrible. Fire everyone all the time. But I guess I still have faith in Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi to turn this thing around. And I think that their plan may require walking on eggshells. Trading Jarvis Brownlee Jr. sucks. The losing sucks. If they trade T'Vondre Sweat, that's not going to go over well with the fan base. All of that. I get all of that. But sometimes you got to take some steps back before you take steps forward. And I am not going to let the failures of Ran Carthon taint how I feel about Mike Borgonzi going forward. Right now, what it seems like is the Titans are simply trying to undo what Ran Carthon has done to the team. They're trying to undo that stuff before they can even begin to build forward. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it if you want. But at the end of the day, it is obvious that they're rejecting everything that Ran Carthon did. And also at the end of the day, I remember when the Tennessee Titans were stuck in the middle. And all anybody said was, this is purgatory. Me included. This is purgatory. The Titans are not good enough to be a real contender, but they're not bad enough to get high draft picks and get good players. They're just stuck in the middle. Well, folks, they aren't stuck in the middle right now. So just keep that in your back pocket, that if the Titans were 3-6 or, you go to 4-5 and you have a chance. But if they finish the season 6-11, 7-10, 5-12, you would all just be mad that they weren't bad enough to get a high draft pick and they weren't good enough to actually compete. Well, we don't have to worry about that right now. But again, it's a scary time for me. You never know when someone's going to be traded and ruin the content. But at the end of the day, if something happens, I'll be out here to tell you guys exactly what went down. I'm thinking we're going to see at least 2 trades for the Titans on Tuesday. But again, I'll be here to break it down when it happens. That's going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.